This is Michael Popak with a Legal AF hot take. Will Donald Trump go to jail if he's convicted of a felony and or misdemeanor at the upcoming Stormy Daniels election interference hush money cover-up case? It starts with a jury selection early next week. The trial is scheduled to go to 6 to 8 weeks. And what's on everybody's mind? Well, if a jury of 12 finds 12-0 against Donald Trump on the 34 felony counts, or somehow the judge allows the jury to consider whether the misdemeanor counts alone of business record fraud can stand. Either way, if there's a conviction for one felony or 34 felonies or anything in between, or perhaps misdemeanor, it would then go to the trial judge, the same Judge Merchan that Donald Trump and his lawyers have been bashing, harassing, doxing, and going after his family almost incessantly from the very beginning. That Judge Merchan, with wide discretion, without appellate review until the very end, gets to handle the sentencing. Now, what normally happens in state court, as contrasted with federal court when there's a conviction, is if the jury convicts, let's say in 6 or 8 weeks, there comes back a 12-0 verdict for the prosecution, for the people of the state of New York. Just the same way that there was a 12-0 conviction of organizations and businesses owned by Donald Trump 2 years ago in a business record and / tax evasion fraud case, in which his companies were found guilty of all 17 counts of tax fraud. So jurors, that glass ceiling has already been broken. Jurors will convict Donald Trump and convict his companies and him potentially criminally, and they have. Donald Trump has actually lost 30-0 with all jurors, not one in any of his civil or criminal cases in New York in the last 2.5 years. E. Jean Carroll, 9-0 the first case, a loss. E. Jean Carroll, 9-0 second case, a loss. Donald Trump, his organization's being sued for tax fraud, 17-0, a loss. By extension, Alan Weisselberg, who's now gone to jail again for perjury, also 17 counts of tax evasion that he was convicted of. So Donald Trump does not do well in front of juries, and he generally loses by a lot. Let's assume that happens again. I'll do other hot takes, and others will do it also on Legal AF about the weight of evidence and the type of evidence and the type of witnesses that'll be brought into the courtroom in front of the jury in this election interference / business record fraud case that starts next week against him. The first criminal trial ever yet against Donald Trump. Let's fast forward and say that we get, once all the fighting's over, we get down to a jury verdict, and the jury verdict comes back with one or more felony convictions. Let's stay with felony convictions for a minute, and then I'll do a little bit of an analysis about a misdemeanor conviction. What's the felony conviction that could happen? Well, as pled in the indictment and as will be argued at trial, it's that Donald Trump, along with a number of other people in his orbit, concocted and conspired to pay off Stormy Daniels in particular, although they had done it with others, $130,000 to get her not to go to the press about her having sex with Donald Trump while he was married, just after the birth of Barron Trump, in order to protect his campaign fortunes, right? That he freaked out after the Access Hollywood hot mic recording came out, in which which he's never denied that it's him. It's not AI generated. It is him claiming that he can sexually assault women and get away with it because he's a celebrity. That's generally not good for a campaign. That's what we call an October surprise when it popped up in October against Hillary Clinton. And so they didn't want any more. So the indictment goes, they devised this strategy, and to cover it up and cover the tracks, and that's where the crime comes in, they recorded it on the books and records as a legal expense to Michael Cohen, who took out a loan to pay the money to Stormy Daniels to get her to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, with him, Michael Cohen, which was binding, although I'm not sure what the consideration there was, the exchange of value, because Michael Cohen's not the one that would have been harmed by the disclosure of the sex that Trump had with Stormy Daniels. But put that aside for a minute. Save that for a Patreon exclusive take I'll do. Then you have the series of cover-ups involving Alan Weisselberg and the business record fraud. And the second crime, because you need a second shoe to drop in New York in order for it to rise to the level of a felony, because business record fraud in and of itself is a misdemeanor. To ratchet it up to a felony, and the 34 felony counts in the indictment, you have to marry it to another crime. Doesn't The statute doesn't list what the other crime has to be, but it's another crime. It can be a local or state election interference crime, which I think is what they'll be charging here. Or they don't have to charge it. What will be presented to the jury. They only have to present the second crime, not as a part of a charge. He hasn't been charged with a second crime. It's just that there was a second crime that Donald Trump was trying to facilitate with the business record fraud. So federal election interference, state election interference, right? They're trying to keep this from the voter so he would get elected, this information. And then you also have a federal campaign violation because the $130,000 exceeds the amount that somebody can donate to a campaign, or it should have been seen as an in-kind contribution to the campaign, which exceeded the limits. That's a federal campaign violation. It's one of the reasons Michael Cohen went to jail on a plea related to this same transaction federally. So that's the second crime situation. Now let's say the jury comes back with there was a second, the business record fraud was in furtherance of a second crime, and the second crime is, I don't know, tax evasion because they took the business deduction on their books and records, or election interference, or something like that. Okay, now jury returns a verdict, and they'll have a verdict form. They'll have 34 counts on it. They'll have to say whether they found Donald Trump guilty on which of the 34 counts or any of the 34 counts. And let's say they come back with all of it. I really think it's binary. I think they either find him guilty of doing this or they don't. I think he's either going to lose 34-0 or he's not, but we'll see. Let's say they find him guilty on half, 12 felony counts. And they don't take the opportunity to say, we want to convict him of a misdemeanor because we don't find the second crime happened. Let's just focus on felony conviction right now. Okay. So he's got 12 or so felony convictions. Now, a couple of months later, after there's been sentencing reports that have been prepared, he comes back to be sentenced. Now, in the interim, he's probably, just to tell everybody, to prepare them, he's probably not going to go to Rikers Island and sit there for a month or two while the sentencing papers and sentencing process continues. He's not. He's going to go out the front door. He's going to have to post probably a bond, a bail, He's not very good at that, but he'll have to do it this time, and he'll have to promise, and his lawyers have to promise to return him to court for sentencing. The chances of him, sort of fleeing the jurisdiction or fleeing the country are low, given he's trying to run for president. Although nothing would surprise me with Donald Trump. So I want to prepare everybody. He's going to walk out the courthouse door with his lawyers. He'll come back. There'll be a sentencing. Judge Merchan will listen to the prosecutors and what they're proposing. He'll decide whether the sentences are to be run concurrently, if he gives them a sentence, or consecutively, meaning are we going to add them together? Are we going to get to 4 years on every count at 34 counts and 136 years? Or are we going to do something else? Now, New York limits for this type of crime, there's a 20-year maximum effectively for these crimes. So he's looking at top end about 20 years. But is the judge ever going to get to 20 years under these circumstances? Sometimes I wish we could have things in life both ways, like a great glass of red wine, but without the headache. Well, that's not going to happen in that example, but it is possible to have it both ways with Mack Weldon. I know men tend to think looking sharp means starchy Oxfords and stiff chinos, rather than effortless comfort. But it's possible to have it both ways with Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon makes timeless apparel with modern performance fabrics for guys who want to look and feel sharp without sacrificing comfort. From their light as air underwear to innovative anti-odor tees and versatile yet comfortable pants, Mack Weldon has a full range of clothes that never go out of style. I love my Mack Weldon Ace sweatpants. They're incredibly comfortable and also very sharp looking. I have a real confidence boost knowing I'm wearing anything sold by Mack Weldon. Some guys just want to look good without calling attention to themselves. Mack Weldon apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. Mack Weldon clothes are designed to fit your style and the demands of modern life. They look like regular clothes, but feel like the latest in modern comfort. They're the go-to choice for guys who want to look great without even trying. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code LegalAF. That's MackWeldon.com, promo code LegalAF. Now, Norm Eisen, who writes for Just Security, is a lawyer, friend of MeidasTouch. he's looked at business record fraud cases in New York at the felony level, and people have, of course, gone to jail for it. Some have gone to jail for, a couple of months for every count of that they're convicted of, or 1 month for every count that they're convicted of. Some have gone away for 3 months, 6 months, or a year for similar type charges. So, the average observer, and I'll add myself to that list, thinks that he's going to get anywhere between probation and 2 years tops maximum in prison. Probation meaning he doesn't serve a day in jail, and 2 years, and up to 2 years, probably the consensus around this is that he's going to go to jail if he gets convicted and Judge Merchan sentences him somewhere between 6 months and a year. 6 months and a year. We'll talk about where in a minute. Now, his constant attacks on Judge Merchan is not helping him, right? Because Judge Merchan can credit, and has been known, as he's supposed to credit witnesses' testimony in determining sentences, determining the level of culpability, the severity of the crime, and the severity of the acts. And you'll often hear a sentencing judge say, "I was persuaded by the testimony of blah, blah, blah." And if Donald Trump is stupid enough to take the stand, his own words could be used against him. It's another reason I don't think he takes the stand. We'll leave that for another hot take on another day. But the judge, I'll give you an example. When the judge sentenced Alan Weisselberg, Donald Trump's chief financial officer, who's going to jail for the second time for 5 more months at Rikers Island, I assure you, is scaring the shit out of Donald Trump. He does not want to be another 80-year-old guy going away to Rikers Island or somewhere else. And he's now watched at least 2 of his cronies, Alan Weisselberg and Peter Navarro, go to jail for months, 4 months and 5 months. And Steve Bannon will probably go away for a couple of months once his appeal is over. He does not want to be that guy. As tough as he talks, as much false bravado as he gives out, Donald Trump is a coward, and he does not want to go to jail. Okay? So he will try every which way he can, as we're watching, to try to avoid the trial and then at the sentencing time. But Judge Merchan is in charge. Judge Merchan has his liberty, Donald Trump's liberty and other things, in his hands. And having credited, as I was about to say, when he sentenced Alan Weisselberg took a plea deal in the tax fraud case where the Trump organization went down for 17 felony counts. And he took a deal where he agreed to testify one way or the other against Trump, ultimately. And the judge said, "All right, I'll agree to the deal that you and the prosecutors have come up with, 5 months. You go away for 5 months." But later on, and he did. He went away for with COVID, he went away for about 100 days with good behavior in Rikers Island. He's now going back for another 5 months for perjury. We'll leave that for another hot take. But the judge said out loud, as is appropriate, having now heard all of the evidence at trial against Alan Weisselberg, I would have given him a much harsher sentence had there not been a plea deal and had he not cooperated. And if Donald Trump has no plea deal and Donald Trump doesn't cooperate, which he's not going to against himself, then the judge has every full discretion to throw the book at him and to give him a very harsh sentence. Now, is he going to put him away for 4 years, 8 years, or 10 years? He's not. Just to manage expectations. It's going to be somewhere in this probation to 1.5 year level. But if it's on the prison side, then the judge has to decide, where does the guy serve time? Especially if by the time he's sentenced, he somehow makes his way back to the White House, because he'll have to go to jail. For those that are around the world or even in our own country, he can be president and still be in jail. Yes, we have that quirk in our Constitution. Doesn't disqualify somebody, and it doesn't say he's incapacitated. Now, could his cabinet that he comes into office with decide to invoke the 25th Amendment and take him out of office? Sure. But I'm just saying there's nothing in the Constitution per se other than the 25th Amendment where they find he has a disability and take him out and then, make it go to the vice president at the time, whoever that is. But we'll leave that for another time. The judge is going to have to decide, where does he serve his time? It's not going to be Rikers Island with Secret Service in tow. He's going to have to work with the Secret Service to develop a segregated prison environment. I don't know if that's a military base or if that's some sort of abandoned hotel or something where he both is kept safe as whatever his current title is at the moment that he's sentenced, and the Secret Service provides him protection. And because the Secret Service also provides him protection as a former president. And so they're going to have to come up with those that see him with an orange jumpsuit or whatever the current color is, like at Rikers Island, waiting in line with a pan, a compartmentalized pan for food. It's not going to be exactly like that. But, he's not going to be home confined. It'll be some sort of military prison or hospital-like environment, something for that period of time until he's released. So I always like to fast forward a bit, and kind of binge watch the trial here with you and get to the end of where we're at with what is likely outcomes for Donald Trump if he is, and I think it's likely, convicted by the jury of one or more counts of felony business record fraud and furtherance of another crime. We're going to continue to follow everything about Donald Trump. We've got, first time in our over 270-year history, we've got a former president who's going to be tried for crimes. I mean, putting aside Jefferson Davis for a moment, everybody else either took a plea deal or got pardoned. But this guy is being tried for crimes before he became president. And I'll continue to follow it right here. Also on Legal AF. Join us on Wednesdays. I almost said Tuesdays, our old date. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Legal AF. Yes, join us. You'll find out why we call it that. We sit at the intersection of law and politics so you don't have to, and we get behind the headlines with analysis like this, with lawyers who know what they're talking about at the intersection of law and politics. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. If you talk to the algorithm like that, I may talk back, and it helps keep this content on the air. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popak reporting. Heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.